It's the week ending Friday the 25th of July, and this is the Week Unwrapped. In the past 7 days, we've seen the White House pushing back at reports President Trump is named in the Epstein files, Thailand sealing its borders with Cambodia after rapidly escalating tensions between the two countries, and the death of heavy metal and reality TV star Ozzy Osbourne at the age of 76. You can read all you need to know about everything that matters in the Week magazine, but we're here to bring you some stories that passed under the radar this week. Big news not making headlines right now, but with repercussions for all our lives. I'm Olly Mann, and let's unwrap the week. And let's welcome back from the Week's digital team, Jamie Timson and Harriet Marsden, and from the Week Junior, senior editor Felicity Capon. Also this week, chaps, the Lionesses made it through to the final of the Women's Euros. Harriet, did you succeed in your quest to find a pub to watch it in?
I'm actually watching it with a bunch of friends on Sunday, the final, so I'm very excited about that.
Sounds like a no. Did you just give up?
Unfortunately, I actually had plans that I couldn't change, so I missed it altogether.
What?
But I heard the atmosphere was incredible.
Sheesh. What you should have done, of course, is have plans and then change them 3 minutes from the end, and then you'd have been fine.
Oh, shoulda, woulda, coulda.
Jamie, what about you? You were saying it would be difficult to watch a match cheering on England from Scotland.
Yes, I was at a gig and I managed to get home in time for the goal.
There you go, exactly.
Which
Didn't need to change your plans.
Almost perfect.
And Felicity, you seem very excited when I even mentioned the concept. I'm hoping you were watching from beginning to end.
I was not. I'm a real fair weather friend. I'm now getting into it. Just now I'm getting it. Well, I saw them squeak past Sweden, although I only watched the highlights, and I thought that was pretty exciting. And now I'm like, go England.
Glory hunters. Jamie, you're up first. What do you think this week should be remembered for?
This week we wondered, why is Zelenskyy playing chicken with Kiev's protesters?
It seems to me that he doesn't consider corruption a problem or something wrong, not from the point of view of the law, in general.
From the point of view of values?
Yes, you have the head of the Anti-Monopoly Committee suspected of illegal enrichment. He explains millions in assets by saying that his parents used to sell raspberries in the past. Do you understand the schizophrenia of this story? And this person stays in office for a year.
Ukrainian anti-corruption activist Witaly Shabunin speaking to the Kyiv Independence editor-in-chief Olga Rudenko on Friday. Jamie, what's the story?
Yes, this week we saw a bit of a hokey-cokey from Volodymyr Zelenskyy, where he first initially approved a law that placed previous independent anti-corruption agencies under executive control, and then following widespread protest, some of the kind of biggest protests that we've seen against Zelenskyy since the war, he then, in a kind of state address, said that he would be putting forward another bill that would give back the independence to anti-corruption agencies that he was talking about.
Yeah, so initially there was a new law coming through that was going to bring the National Anti-Corruption Bureau and the Specialised Anti-Corruption Prosecutor's Office under the direct control of him and his government, whereas previously they've been independent.
Yes, and then he said, actually, the anti-corruption infrastructure will work, but without Russian influence, and it needs to be cleared of that. So he was basically saying that the reason that he'd done this was because he felt that there was Russian influence in the NABU and the SBU. Critics of Zelenskyy say that all seems very convenient, right? You know, suddenly he's done something and then he says, actually, it's because the Russians were involved. Honest. I'll bring it back. Also, crucially, he hasn't put forward any text for this new bill for giving back independence to these, and it's not clear exactly when we'll be able to see that new bill, whereas he has signed the law that has taken away the independence of these agencies.
Yes, and this apparent U-turn, Felicity, has come after protests on the streets in Kyiv, which is something that we're not used to seeing, at least being reported in the Western media.
Yes, that's right. I mean, it hasn't just been in Kyiv, it's been across the country in cities such as Odessa and elsewhere. Huge outpouring. I don't think there's been as big as protests since before the Russian invasion. So a huge show of outrage directed to Zelenskyy, which, you know, he just hasn't really been used to. And I think it probably came as a bit of a shock, maybe. And obviously this comes at a time when Ukraine is involved in a war, obviously with Russia. So at a time when you think this would be a showing of national unity. It was very much looking like he could be losing the public and losing public support. And you have to remember that, half the country now has combat experience. This is a population that has been through quite a lot. So for them to turn on their wartime leader in this way is pretty interesting, particularly when Zelenskyy for so long has been the kind of darling of the West, the poster boy, this kind of hero myth sprung up around him that he was in this David and Goliath story, that he was standing up to this Russian aggressor and could do no wrong. And that's obviously all changing now.
Yes. I mean, one of the most powerful placards that I saw, Harriet, was someone holding, obviously it was translated so I could read it, a piece of cardboard that said, "We didn't fight the war for this." I mean, that's the point, isn't it? They've had combat experience so that they could fight for freedom. And this implication was, well, we can't have a real anti-corruption agency if it's controlled by the government. That isn't freedom.
Yeah, so actually I read something really interesting, which I asked my former flatmate, who's Ukrainian, who lives in Kyiv. I asked her about this. I read that there was something in the psyche of the culture of the Ukrainian people that was very fired up about protesting against it. I mean, bear in mind their Maidan Revolution was in 2014. This is not that long ago. There was this enormous revolution that ousted the former president. So I asked her, is there something in the Ukrainian psyche that means that people don't take this sort of thing lying down if they're unhappy about what the government is doing? And she said that sometimes you need to prove your point to the government. So her way of describing what happened was that they effectively took over the department that dealt with anti-corruption cases because that department was kind of looking into the government, and then went on holiday for a month right away, as if they were very tired. So it was a very odd looking process, and everyone's extraordinarily unhappy about it.
Jamie, why did he decide to do this in the first place, since it is clearly an unpopular move?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. There are obviously, as Harriet's flatmate was saying, there are suggestions that that the anti-corruption agency was looking into cabinet ministers and Zelenskyy's close allies in the government. So there is a kind of nefarious reason that you could say that they wanted to take control over it. He would say or he has said that there's been kind of worries about Russian influence in there, and that actually it's through the independent. We know that corruption is a big issue in Ukraine, and I think that there's a worry, or from Zelenskyy's perspective, there's a worry that Russia could lean or get access to the independent and cause the independent corruption agencies and cause issues there. I think the fact that he's done such a quick volte-face kind of suggests that he really didn't think it was going to be that big of a deal, and actually kind of thought that everyone's attention was looking somewhere elsewhere, and he could kind of get this one through. And it, arguably, he probably had some history of doing kind of similar things because of, as Felicity was saying, like his incredible popularity and wartime ethos. But it does show that, is this the beginning, I guess, of a backlash towards Zelenskyy? And, they haven't had elections. They've talked a lot about the potential for future elections after the war has happened. Could someone stand against him? Would he lose? These are all really interesting. What happens after Zelenskyy is a really interesting question.
Yeah, but all of that kind of gives Zelenskyy the benefit of the doubt. I mean, to be more on the nose about it, Felicity, did he try and take control of the anti-corruption agency because he's up to something corrupt?
It certainly looks that way, and that's obviously why everyone in Ukraine is kind of furious. That's obviously why the European Union has come out, and they're very critical of that, because they set up these organisations in the first place, and that was one of the criteria Ukraine had to meet on its journey to becoming part of the European Union, which a lot of people, especially young people in Ukraine, are very much hoping that will happen. Going back to the Panama Papers, some people would say that Zelenskyy was implicated in the Panama Papers. Some people would say there's always been this whiff of corruption around him that a lot of people have conveniently forgotten about. He was sort of Time Magazine's Person of the Year in 2022, and he was this hero. But actually, the Panama Papers, the leaked documents suggested that he had this previously undisclosed stake in an offshore company. He appears to have secretly transferred to a friend weeks before he won the presidential vote. He has lots of friends, lots of allies in high places who have been involved in corruption. So this kind of whiff of it has never really gone away. And as Harriet was saying, it's a really big deal in Ukraine because the legacy of Viktor Yanukovych, who was previous president. I mean, he was brought down because of his corruption, basically. One of the placards that I really liked that I sourced from the protest was a Time magazine cover which featured Zelenskyy, but half of his face was covered by that of Yanukovych. So people are clearly drawing comparisons to this former very, very unpopular leader. And it did not go well for Yanukovych. And will it go the same way for Zelenskyy?
I mean, there's another theory, isn't there, Harriet, which is that Donald Trump might have had something to do with it. Explain that for us.
Yes, the Trump involvement, I think, is quite an interesting one. The theory is that because Trump has this slightly personal history with these agencies, that some people are suggesting that that personal history might have been what led Zelenskyy to take, or at least not to take action, but to assume that he could sort of get away with stripping the independence from these agencies, because during Trump's first term, his supporters accused these specific agencies of helping with the investigation into Russian meddling in the 2016 US election. So there is a little bit of a history there. But I think it's also fair to say that this is just kind of the latest in like a series of maneuvers that have been accused of being attempts to consolidate power and crack down on pro-reform activists and tighten power at this incredibly perilous moment for Ukraine as the Russian troops are advancing. So some people are accusing, or have been accusing, the Zelenskyy administration for a while of abusing their special martial law wartime authority to consolidate power. So using these arrests as like a pretext for undermining the watchdog and silencing critics. But to be fair to Zelenskyy, on the other hand, in an audit of the National Anti-Corruption Bureau published this year, this expert commission found that it was only moderately effective and not immune to political pressure. So there are some legitimate criticisms of these agencies as well.
I suppose as well, Jamie, obviously people will protest this, but if it is being done to ensure that America continues to support Ukraine, if it is part of a deal with President Trump, then ultimately that is consistent in Zelenskyy's commitment to ensure that they have as much cash as possible in their fight against Russia.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's the big issue is, accession to the EU is a really important thing for Zelenskyy, but maybe it's a really important thing somewhere down the line. It's maybe not as important as getting the money and the weapons and everything now. So maybe it is a calculated decision on his part that if we can keep the US on side and we can keep the kind of money flowing in, then maybe later on down the line we can be like, oh yeah, of course we'll make those things independent. I think it maybe does show a real kind of mindset change amongst maybe Zelenskyy and the Ukrainian leadership of, we actually need to now focus much more on the war. And we know from, as Harriet was saying, it's actually a really perilous moment in terms of whether or not Ukraine can survive this year. And particularly as we go into the winter and there will be another Russian offensive, whether or not that, how close we are to a ceasefire or something. Because from Putin's perspective, he's happy for this to drag on and on and on and on. And Ukraine can't really afford that.
Okay. Up next, what has Trump's White House withdrawn America from? That's after this. Okay, Harriet, it's your turn. What do you think this week should be remembered for?
Did Trump just make the US a little bit more uncultured?
The Pyramids of Giza, Yellowstone National Park, the Taj Mahal, some of the more than 1,200 cultural sites around the world that UNESCO has deemed to be of outstanding value to humanity.
I'm delighted to welcome you to the 47th session of the World Heritage Committee.
In Paris this month, a committee met to add to that list, something that's been done nearly every year since 1978.
PBS NewsHour reporting on some of the additions to the UNESCO World Heritage List on Friday. Okay, Harriet, just before we get into this, because we're going to quickly get lost in the bureaucratic weeds, for people who aren't entirely sure, what is UNESCO? What exactly is UNESCO and what do they do?
Well, it's a United Nations body. It's the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization.
Ping!
And what it...
1 point to you.
Thank you. Thank you. I've been practicing that, actually. It's mainly known for being responsible for choosing and protecting the kind of more than 1,200 World Heritage sites, which are all around the world in more than 165 countries. So those are cultural or natural landmarks that have outstanding historical or cultural values. So things like Yellowstone National Park, Machu Picchu, the Acropolis in Athens, the Great Barrier Reef, the Lake District, the Tower of London, the City of Bath, actually.
That's a weird one, I always think. You can't put a whole city in, I don't think. I mean, Pompeii, okay.
I think it's a really interesting one, actually. But this United Nations body was founded in 1945 after the Second World War with kind of a peacekeeping function. So the idea is to promote peace and international cooperation in education and sciences and culture through dialogue and mutual understanding. So it also has a big cultural and educational program to kind of promote dialogue between cultures.
Which is something that a lot of people frankly don't know about or understand, right? They think UNESCO and they think about the World Heritage stuff like we've just been saying, and that maybe goes to the heart of this issue we're about to explore. But what's happened this week?
Well, this week, the Trump administration has confirmed that the US will be pulling out of UNESCO only 2 years after it rejoined. So this is actually the second time that Trump has pulled the US out of UNESCO. But this time, the White House said that UNESCO works to advance divisive social and cultural causes and maintains an outsized focus on the UN's Sustainable Development Goals. And the White House deputy spokesperson said that UNESCO supports woke, divisive, cultural and social causes that are out of step with the common sense policies Americans voted for.
Felicity, have you had a look at any of these policies that they might be referring to, and do you understand where they're coming from?
I mean, Trump isn't the first person to have withdrawn. So in 1983, Ronald Reagan, his administration withdrew because he said UNESCO had an anti-Western bias and has extraneously politicized virtually every subject it deals with. Obama also withdrew its funding, and that was over anti-Israel bias, which I think is an issue again, and it's over sort of making recognizing Palestine as a state and that sort of thing. In the UK, Margaret Thatcher pulled the UK out of UNESCO, and Penny Mordaunt was talking about leaving in 2018. So it's certainly, Trump isn't the first person to have thought there is something problematic with this organization, and maybe we shouldn't be part of it. I mean, when he says it's woke, I mean, it depends how you define woke, really. I think more people would have an issue with it for being bloated and ineffective. I couldn't immediately see how it was woke. But I mean, it plays very well with his voter base, and it's part of the president's drive to pull the US out of a series of global bodies, including the World Health Organization, halting funding to the Palestinian Relief Agency, pulling the US out of the Paris Climate Agreement. And when you look at what he's done with US aid, which has massively pulled that back from countries, which I would argue is more troubling than UNESCO, which I can see that there are definitely problems with UNESCO. I can see why you would want out, really.
Well, I tried to approach this, impartially as ever. I'm not generally a big fan of America First, so if I had a bias, it would be to think that the Trump government had pushed this too far. But, Jamie, I looked into some of the things that UNESCO have been doing recently. One such is the Gender Equality Quest in Video Games, a global overview of gender dynamics in video gaming. That does, and maybe it is because I, as I was saying to Harriet, didn't have an appreciation of UNESCO's historical role in cultural conversations beyond monuments and stuff, but I did look at that and think, sure, but why are UNESCO funding that? Like, that is not the same as protecting Stonehenge, is it? That seems like something a different body should be doing, like something about women's rights, not UNESCO.
I'm going to shock you here. About 10 years ago, I was part of the Global Alliance on Media and Gender for UNESCO.
Wow, so many hidden folds to your chest of background.
I went to Geneva like 3 times, and I was pretty bloated, to use Felicity's term, after all the fondue that I was having there. But the point of the body that I was sitting on as in part of the International Steering Committee was about helping equality in the media. To be honest, a lot of the stuff that UNESCO does, you'd struggle to, I mean, you've picked out obviously a fun one with the video games, but you would struggle to say that it's not important to have more cross-cultural communication. It goes back to what we were saying about soft power and the way that the UK, for example, has really lost a lot of its soft power. A lot of the time, countries that are at war or not talking to each other won't talk to each other at the UN about serious things, quote unquote serious things, but they will talk to each other behind the scenes about things that are culturally important or that they share cultural values on. So a lot of the time, backdoor channels such as UNESCO are so important for getting two sides that are at war or against each other to be in contact. And yes, the meeting might be about gender equality in video games, but ultimately the fact that they're talking to each other and working together on stuff like this is massively important for keeping channels open and discussions open.
I mean, that's really interesting, but why not keep the channels open but have the conversation ostensibly about, you know, protecting stone murals, which is what it's for?
Yeah, I mean, UNESCO obviously has a massive purview in terms of what it can talk about and what it's interested in. And that's to do with the kind of levels of funding, and is chosen by, you know, the people at the top of the UN. And surprise, surprise, it's a massive almost like civil service organization. And it loves to give itself more jobs to do that can take lots of time and doesn't actually get very far. Believe me, I have sat on those meetings. I know that is the case. But I would say that there is a benefit to being part of UNESCO and being involved in the conversations rather than pulling yourself out.
Felicity.
I mean, it's also exacerbated tensions between countries. So it doesn't just work as this lovely conversation where everyone gets together and talks about global heritage. China and India filed rival claims over Tibetan medicine. Japan withheld funding after documents on the 1937 Nanjing massacre in China were added to UNESCO's Memory of the World list. And like it's hit some real bum notes. In 2012, it elected Syria to a panel to judge human rights abuses. That was when Assad was in charge. So, I mean, it has also exacerbated tensions between countries. And, you know, it's also outrage. It knocked Liverpool off its list of UNESCO World Heritage in 2021 because it decided that building a football stadium in Everton meant that it could no longer qualify as a World Heritage Site. And Liverpudlians, well, actually, I'm not sure Liverpudlians really cared because they thought, well, people will still come and visit us for the Beatles and the Liver building and the Three Graces and Penny Lane, etc., etc. But I think there was a sense of outrage that Liverpool wanted to modernise, and, you know, a bunch of people who, you know, hadn't visited Liverpool in 10 years decided that it was no longer worthy of a World Heritage Site.
How has UNESCO responded to all of this, Harriet, given that America has withdrawn twice before? They were presumably prepared for this possibility.
Well, firstly, I've got a personal connection like Jamie as well. So my dad actually works in World Heritage, and he's also from Liverpool. So it's not 100% true that nobody who works in World Heritage ever went to Liverpool to look at that.
Felicity, are you the President of the United States of America? Because then we've got the hat trick. Everyone's associated with this story.
I might be. I should be.
You'd be doing a better job. But in terms of how UNESCO has responded, obviously, it's going to be a massive blow to UNESCO's work, particularly in terms of all of the sites, all of the World Heritage sites that there are in the US. And there are 26, and they're very, very, very important. But they have also said that they have been braced for this departure because, as we said, Trump has withdrawn once before, and the US only provides about 8% of its total budget. So it's actually like a less severe departure for UNESCO than the US departure from, for example, the World Health Organization, which the US is the biggest financial backer. But in terms of finances, if we're talking about the advantages of being a member of UNESCO, the UK, for example, contributes roughly £11 million per year, and it gets about £100 million added value to the economy from the designation of World Heritage Sites. So there is an extraordinarily large net economic benefit to being a member of UNESCO.
Yeah, so I guess what's interesting is whether it matters, Jamie, though, whether America's part of the organisation or not in terms of that economic benefit. People will always want to go to Yellowstone, and actually presumably UNESCO are not going to suddenly say, oh, Yellowstone's not part of our heritage list. I mean, it clearly is, even if America aren't contributing.
Not unless they build a football stadium in the middle of Yellowstone, and suddenly people are going to fall over themselves. No, I think the broader. I mean, obviously they've made a point. It's a good PR win for Trump. It fits in with their America First ideology, as we've discussed. I mean, Obama pulled out funding in 2011 because of the Palestine Israel stuff.
The accusation is that they're anti-Israel, but that comes from specifically them being the first body to admit Palestine.
Yeah, Palestine became a full member of UNESCO in 2011, and so the Obama administration stopped providing funding to the organisation because it was barred to do so by US law. We've discussed the ways in which it obviously is a good win. I think if you take a kind of macro view, where it looks to be another way for China to kind of continue to push its tentacles out into they've been looking to replace a lot of what the US does in the United Nations, and UNESCO is no different, and China is kind of filling the vacuum that is being left by the US at the UN, doing a lot of brokering behind the scenes for conversations, particularly when it comes to foreign policy, because they can provide a kind of opposite point to where the US were on a lot of it. So yeah, I mean, it's while on the face of it, it's like this is a story about, the Leaning Tower of Pisa. It's actually got a much wider repercussions for the kind of future of geopolitics, I think.
Also for the future of AI as well. I think something that a lot of people don't realize is that UNESCO is the UN agency in charge of setting artificial intelligence guidelines.
Like, why? That's
why?
Again,
because
weird, right?
It's science, education, and culture.
But then there must be other organisations who are dealing with AI, who are talking between countries. Why on earth would you need UNESCO?
I think every single organisation in every single world body is dealing with AI. But
exactly.
Just to be specific, this is the UN agency in charge of setting the UN's artificial intelligence guidelines, which makes this really important that China has effectively replaced the US, not just in terms of financially. So China has taken the place of the US for the biggest financial backer of UNESCO. Also, its deputy director general is a Chinese official now. It recently, this month, got its 60th World Heritage Site, which means that now China is tied with Italy for the top slot for all World Heritage Sites.
What can it do? As an organisation, what can it actually do? I mean, even when it comes to World Heritage Sites, it doesn't really have any power. Like, you saw the Taliban in 2001 demolish the Buddhas, and no one could do anything about it. And that's what it's famous for, is the World Heritage Sites.
There is a big, as Jamie was explaining, there is a big element of soft power, but there is also a big element about UNESCO has quite a lot of power over deciding what counts as history and what counts as culture. So, for example, UNESCO has also given a lot of support to major projects like the Belt and Road Initiative, which has huge economic impact in Africa, in Latin America, and around the world. Beijing's also really lobbied hard for these World Heritage Sites designations, and some of them are in like oppressed regions like Tibet, like Felicity was saying, like in Tibet. So locals have said that to get this kind of World Heritage designation would be to undermine what they're saying about the oppression and control their culture and history.
But I think Felicity's point is a good one, though, about what is the point of these bodies, and like what is the point of the UN and what is the point of UNESCO. Look at the UN. Is that like that they can sit around and put out, another accord saying that they are against the war in Ukraine and it doesn't make a difference, or they demand a ceasefire in Palestine and it doesn't make a difference. Actually, this rules-based order that we've kind of grown up on, it doesn't. People don't care about it anymore.
Well,
and
but on culture, there is an opportunity, isn't there? I mean, I think, the discussion about what's the point of the UN is a bigger one, probably for another day. But on the point of culture, that's the whole, to me, that was the point, is here's the thing everyone can agree, is that even if you betray human rights, when you bomb a city, you shouldn't bomb the culture that was put there 2,000 years ago. Everyone used to agree on that. And the issue is that they've gone beyond that brief.
Like, they're not going to bomb it because they've got a video games wing or because they're talking about AI.
No, but I think the idea, I suppose, whether or not it actually is the reality, I think that the idea is that if you designate sites, like, for example, the city of Palmyra in Syria, if you designate sites as World Heritage, and that doesn't just include economic protection and support, it does also include massive amounts of international recognition and contributes to a wider conversation about protecting certain cultural heritage sites. So
you're saying this goes beyond this particular ethnic group that you're killing and is actually everyone's culture and heritage.
I think that there are very, very legitimate criticisms to be made about the funding issues, the bloating issues, the effectiveness of certain declarations or certain edicts that don't prevent war and don't do this, do that. Absolutely 100%. But at least the purpose, the idea underpinning this organization of promoting dialogue through culture and a shared appreciation of natural and historical value, I think we can all agree that it is a good idea.
Inevitably, what's going to happen next, though, Felicity, surely, is that at some point, I'm not saying in the next election, but, perhaps the one after that, the Democrats will get a president and then they'll reverse it again, won't they? I mean, that's what's going to happen.
Yes, I mean, that's what happened when Biden was in power. He reversed it. But I think they were then in arrears and America had to pay like millions of pounds back into the organisation. So I guess it's that constant flip-flopping. And that's why, as Harriet was saying, it came as no surprise to UNESCO that this was going to happen. It wasn't really a surprise to anyone that Trump was going to do this. But yeah, I'm sure it will just flip-flop back when... Well, I mean, if there is ever a Democrat president who comes back. But yeah, we'll have to see.
OK. Up next, could lime be squeezed out of London? That's after this. OK, Felicity, you are finishing the show. What do you think this week should be remembered for?
Bikes in Belgravia are turning Joan Collins sour.
Had a dreadful time getting here on, and I'm sorry if you don't live in London, Manchester, Nottingham or Milton Keynes, which I think are the cities in the UK that have lime bikes. But
didn't know Milton Keynes had lime.
Yeah, well, I googled that when I should have been moving faster, but not texting while liming. There's these free e-bikes, and they're the scourge of cities. They're really useful, but they're used by irresponsible people who are just making, and that's me, loads of me's people. And this would be horrible if this happened, but I think I'm saying this, so I'll try really hard for it not to happen. Please, can I not die on a line with a meal deal in the basket? Because there's a world in which
that would be so bleak.
It would be really bleak.
It would be
so it's good to have
bleak.
this on record because I spend a lot of my life on a line with a meal deal in the basket.
Comedian Ivo Graham speaking to Mel Gedroych on her podcast Where There's a Will, There's a Wake on Tuesday. Felicity, what's the story?
The story is that Joan Collins has a bit of a bee in her bonnet this week. She wrote...
Dame Joan Collins, please.
The Dame Joan Collins, yes. She penned an article this week in The Spectator lamenting an invasion in her very posh London neighbourhood, but also across London more generally, about an invasion of lime bikes. She says she's been almost run over twice. She's tripped over discarded cycles, and the riders seem to care not for road rules, pedestrian safety, or anyone but themselves.
Yeah, it was a wild tract. Several news outlets are reporting the surge in the dangerous crossings of immigrants coming to our shores and the cost of giving them succour, she said. But in the next sentence, but I'm seeing an invasion of a different sort. That's extraordinary column. Yeah. But what is it about lime bikes that she dislikes so much?
Well, they're quite a Marmite topic, and it sort of feels like people are falling into two camps. You either love the lime bikes or you hate them. If you hate them, like Joan Collins, it's that they are piling up everywhere. So I think it's starting to change now, but to begin with lime bikes, you could just sort of leave them anywhere, and you would use your phone and a code that would let the company know you'd left them. But this means that they're just sort of piling up everywhere. I think some councils are now bringing in parking bays where they have to be parked in a specific bay. But people are driving them very, very quickly. So there's been lots of accidents, and accidents are actually on the rise. And celebrities are sort of talking out about this. So Ian Hislop is another celeb who's kind of furious. He was hit by one. On the other side, there are loads of celebs who love them, including Harry Styles, who was seen riding around with James Corden on a lime bike. Olivia Rodrigo. Timothy Chalamet turned up to the UK premiere of his Bob Dylan film on a lime bike.
Yeah, he got a fine, didn't he? Because he didn't park it properly.
He got a fine,
He just dumped it outside the Odeon Leicester Square.
But lots of young people see them as, very green. They're good for the environment. They're cheap. Cheapish. You can get across one side of the capital to the other. So it just depends where you are. You either love them or you hate them.
I mean, couldn't the same be said, Harriet, about bikes? I mean, I'm just thinking about this from the perspective of Lime, who might be listening to this, thinking, well, hold on, we're providing a service. It's up to people who rent our bikes as to whether they drive them badly, or they park them in the wrong place we're asking them not to, or they don't wear a helmet. That's the same as a bike.
Well, it's not quite the same because they're so much more powerful than a bike and they're so much heavier than a bike. So actually, London Centric, which is Jim Waterson's publication, he was the media editor of The Guardian. He now runs this London publication, has been doing a lot of reporting on Lime bikes. And an investigation came out in March. They hired 50 Lime bikes in central London and asked a mechanic to test each one. And they found that nearly half the bikes had some mechanical issue, like a loose kickstand or a broken wheel. Nearly 20% had missing parts, and more worryingly, 14% had brake problems or brakes that weren't working. The mechanic said that 12% of the bikes should have been removed from the streets immediately. But even after reporting all these issues to Lime, most of them remained available to hire by members of the public and looked fine to ride. So Lime's not actually regulated when it comes to ensuring safety and maintenance of the bikes in London. Now, on Lime's side, it says that safety is its highest priority and that it regularly checks the bikes, but it doesn't take them out of circulation, even when it gets reports from users of faults, because they think that customers might be overstating the severity of the problem. So they said that they will mark the bike for inspection, but they don't remove it from service unless additional reports are received. But they didn't say how many reports. The other thing that's come out is this thing that a surgeon has been calling Lime leg. So an NHS doctors are saying that there have been more motorbike style leg breaks experienced by Lime customers because they're really, really heavy. The weight and the speed of them means that a small accident that you'd have on a normal bike, like a relatively minor accident, might transform into like a really life-changing injury. So there are big concerns about safety that I think are worth considering before you get a Lime bike.
So this is the issue that if a Lime bike is to fall on your own leg, perhaps because the brakes are faulty, but perhaps just because you're cycling badly, Jamie, it can break your leg in a way that a normal bike can't. But I suppose, again, that's about you preparing to understand that you're driving an electronically powered bike. It's not a bike, it's different.
Yeah, I think there's a kind of personal responsibility aspect. I guess the thing that we've not touched on is the issues for blind people and disabled people. Obviously, it is beginning to change, but initially when they came, you could just leave the bikes wherever. That was part of the appeal of them, was that they were dockless rather than dock full, I guess. And the fact that they were dockless often meant that people were just leaving them on the street, and if you're blind, that's quite a hazard. Similarly, if you're in a wheelchair, that makes it quite difficult to get round, particularly on pavements in London that aren't necessarily the most well paved. So there is a question about accessibility and about regulation on that in that regard. They are also quite expensive in comparison to public transport. I think it's like £8.25 for a 25-minute journey, which is obviously a lot more than the bus. But you can get Lime passes, Lime Prime, I think it's called. Any kind of Lime pun that you want to use that will reduce the kind of per minute cost of them. It does seem to be a kind of generational thing, right? Joan Collins and Ian Hislop are hardly the young guns that they once were cutting about London. It does seem to be young people that seem to be using them more and more. So
yeah, Lime claims that nearly half of Londoners aged between 18 and 34 hire a Lime bike in any given week. So there is a reason that the number of journeys on Lime bikes has increased by like 85% last year. They are filling a gap in the transport network, and they are democratizing cycling.
But it does make sense that the older generations would have more of a problem with them, because if a really dangerous bike is flying past you, you're more likely to suffer an accident than a younger person who can jump out of the way. And I think one of the problems is the speed. Like, a lot of people who are using them because they cost this amount of money, like time is money, so you're going to run a red light, you're going to go super fast. There's a lot of, not just about Lime bikes, but e-bikes in general are being used by people who work for fast food delivery companies like Deliveroo and Uber Eats, and it makes sense for them if they're getting paid by how many number of deliveries they make to go as fast as they possibly can. So they definitely are a hazard, and it makes sense that they're more of a hazard for older people or disabled people.
They're also an environmental hazard as well. So hundreds of them are being dumped in rivers and canals, and the batteries that power them, they have these substances that if the bikes are submerged in the water, then they can seep into the water system. So in Nottingham, for example, which seems to be a particular hotspot, one charity says that they're pulling 8 or 9 Lime bikes out of the canal every week.
Why are
Because
people dumping them in the water?
The consensus seems to be that they're dumped by people who steal them rather than paying customers. The problem with Lime bikes is
but why not just dump them on the side of the road like every other criminal?
Because
bit of fun, mate. Have a bit of fun. Throw your
Live a
bike in the
little.
water. Come on. Yeah, live a little.
I don't know why people would be throwing Lime bikes into
You're not
canals
telling
or
me
rivers.
you
It
didn't
seems
do-
mad to me.
When you were a child, Ollie, you didn't do some sort of kind of like mindless vandalism for fun.
You put the traffic cone on the statue's head, but the police officer can retrieve the traffic cone. You don't throw it in the river.
It's also about hiding evidence, because I don't know if you've been in London recently, any of you guys, but I guarantee that
how
you
out
will
of touch
hear-
do you think I am? I do live in the southeast. I don't know if you've been in London recently.
Well, I
do
saw
go
you
to
in the
London.
pub
I
2
visit
weeks
London.
ago.
Yeah,
But I was going to say
I
that
can't hire a Lime bike where I live, although I have seen them dumped in the woods around here. So it does hint at what you're saying.
people are calling it the soundtrack of the summer in London, that there's a certain noise that stolen Lime bikes make when they come down the street. So it's this like beeping sound. So they're being stolen on a kind of a scale that we can't really imagine. And I think a lot of it is to do with the battery, because these really powerful lithium batteries, if you kind of remove the battery case from the bike and override the safety feature, you can then either sell it online, and they're worth like more than £300, or you can use them to convert pedal bikes into electronic bikes with
that's really cool
components.
I mean, a cool bit of criminality. Sorry, obviously shouldn't do it, but that's amazing.
It's actually contributing to a massive rise in fires because of these secondhand batteries with no like safety standards and components. But there is a big argument if you're a criminal and you see, and it is in London, they're just scattered everywhere. If you remove the battery and sell it or convert a pedal bike into an electronic bike, and you make a substantial profit, and then you might chuck the bike into the canal or the river to kind of remove any evidence of criminality, they are contributing to a really worrying increase in fires because of this secondhand battery situation.
I mean, it does seem, Felicity, like the solution to a lot of the problems we've been illustrating is simply more regulation. Why is there not more regulation, and do you think there's some coming?
Yes, definitely. I think it's happened really, really quickly. It is an invasion in some ways, in that it's happened. It's like a revolution. It's a green revolution.
A green revolution with toxic batteries being thrown into the river.
Kind of, but it's happened so quickly that I don't think anyone's really had a chance to implement the regulations that we need. But I think that's coming. I mean, you've already seen, I think Brent Council tried to get rid of them entirely. It was so fed up. And the company that's based in San Francisco, I think they know that there is this real pushback. They know how it's affecting disabled people, and they're doing more to work with charities. So I think change is coming. I refuse to believe that something that could be so good for the environment, that could, reduce cars on our streets and bring down pollution, is just going to be, all the benefits are going to be obliterated by like mindless thugs and vandals. I think this is a good thing, but I also do have sympathy with people like Joan Collins who see them littering up the streets. But it's just, the revolution it's going to take time, people, but it's happening, and I think that's overall a good thing.
And if Dame Joan is listening to this and wants to correct the record, please come on the show. I would love that. In the meantime, my thanks to Dame Felicity, Dame Harriet, and Sir Jamie. You can follow this show for free. You can get every episode as soon as it's released. Just search for The Week Unwrapped wherever you get your podcasts, and then tap follow, even if you're a bitch, even if you're wearing the shoulder pads. You can also get 6 free issues of The Week magazine with the trial subscription if you go to theweek.com/subscriptions. In the meantime, I've been Olly Mann. Our music is by Tom Morby, the producer Ollie Peart at Rethink Audio. And until we meet again to Unwrap next week, bye-bye.
Even if you're a bitch.
Oh, don't worry, Harriet. It's for the old people. Joan Collins' biggest hit was called The Bitch. That's what she's known for.
Oh, yeah. I was sensing a real generational divide between you and me.
Yeah.